Good morning. I hope you're all very well, and thank you for joining us here today. So it is my pleasure and privilege to present to you the results from our sight loss survey. So why do we do it? Let's see if we've got... Oh, it works and everything. That's fantastic. So why does Retina UK do a sight loss survey? So the main reason is that we pride ourselves on being the centre of the IRD community and world. We fund research, we're central to the push for treatments, and we are unapologetically the servant of this community. It's our absolute responsibility to have all the information we can get, all the knowledge on this group of conditions, the disease, how it impacts people living with it, and it is our imperative to act upon it. We knew that it was key to reaching more of our community was to engage with meaningfully and usefully with professional populations such as yourself. And since starting this project in 2018, our work with the professional audience has increased substantially and has made a real positive difference to the IRD community. Getting the information right, getting the information quicker. And in this time, we have grown from very few professionals to thousands of you actively engaging with us and showing what commitment is to providing the very best in service to people who are living with these conditions. And it is a joy to see so many of you here today. So let's get into the sight loss survey. So, every experience counts. Let's see what we've got. Oh, I've gone too far. We'll start there. This is Retina UK's third comprehensive tracking survey of the experience of people with inherited sight loss. It follows very similar surveys from 2019 and 2022, and the questions were very similar, you may have noticed if you did it, so we can track what people are telling us. It was completed by anybody living with inherited sight loss, or their parent or guardian if they were under 18. And this year we received 614 responses and have had over 2,300 over the tracking period, so very statistically viable. And you're the first people outside of the organisation to hear these results. I hope you find these findings interesting, and we've structured this session so hopefully you can take away into practice what you learn here today. So let's have a look at some of the learning outcomes. Okay, so what we're hoping to learn today from this session, the impacts of inherited sight loss on the day-to-day lives of those living with the conditions. Which support services have the most positive impact on those living with inherited sight loss? The barriers people may face when accessing information and support. The positive and negative changes to people's experience over the last 6 years, and how those challenges may have been addressed. And the role of professionals to improve positive outcomes. So, the importance of insight. So why is it so important to have this data? Well, it paints a compelling picture of the ongoing challenges faced by the inherited sight loss community. Some are expected. When you read through the results and you look, some make absolute common sense, but some aren't so obvious. And this is where the value of that quantitative data really lies. It shows us where improvements are most needed in health and social care, finding treatments, daily life, emotional well-being, and access to support and technology. Importantly, it also guides how we shape our services and the priorities at Retina UK, making sure that we're meeting the real and current needs of this community. Previous surveys have helped us launch much-needed services and projects, and importantly helped us get these funded. Without the data, it's extremely difficult to accomplish projects and get them funded externally. And we've done things like unlock genetics, we will show you later. I think some of you may be already familiar, and it's significantly increased the uptake of understanding of genetic diagnoses. And that's so important for the route to treatment and for the research that we want to get done. And also Discover Wellbeing, which we launched in 22. And this is heads-on that tackles the challenges of living with a progressive sight loss condition and the effect that has on your mental well-being. And we want to get that before people reach crisis point. With this in mind, I would like to especially thank the sponsors, Sepal Bio and AbbVie. Without the confidence and support of our business partners and our sponsors, we wouldn't be able to fill these parts of the puzzle. And we certainly wouldn't be able to do it as well as we are able to. So the respondents, who let us know what they think? So most of the respondents, 88%, were sight loss registered, and almost 2/3 had been diagnosed with retinitis pigmentosa, or RP. The remainder of the people responding were a range of other conditions, ranging from between 2 and 7%. We know there are still communities that we need to up our efforts to reach, and this continues to prove challenging, but we know we need to focus on 2 areas based on 2 metrics that came back for us. The first is that 95% of the respondents identify as white. And the second is 2/3, 67%, were diagnosed over 20 years ago, and this shows an older population response. So I think it's worth noting at this point that although we do know these are 2 areas of the community that we really do need to focus on and engage with, we have already significantly increased our engagement with 18 to 30-year-olds. And we're in touch, over the last couple of years, this demographic has really engaged with Retina UK, but it hasn't really reflected in the survey responses. So we think there's a couple of reasons for this. One is that this is a fairly new project. We've engaged with this population a lot over the last couple of years, and maybe it takes a little bit of time to embed with Retina UK to realise how important this is. But we do recognise this is an area we need to focus on, as we need to know these views as well. So moving on. Okay, so we asked around genetics. So what we found is over 4 in 10 respondents said they had received a genetic diagnosis for their sight condition. And this is an increase on 2022, which is great news. 29% of all respondents were able to provide the name of gene or specific type of inherited retinal condition they have, which correlated with their specific gene, compared with only 13% in 2019. This is a considerable increase in the proportion of respondents who were able to name their specific genetic diagnosis, and there are benefits to this. In terms of genetic testing, 59% of people who responded have accessed, and 40% felt that made a positive difference, and 54% were not aware. Now, we think that 40% positive difference it's a high number, but we would expect, obviously, to have that diagnosis for it to be a wholly positive experience. And we think, upon reflection, this may be because there are very limited treatments on the market, in fact, just one in the UK. It can feel like, well, I've got this information, what am I going to do with it? Which means that the communication and the information that we give is super important, because for the future it is incredibly, incredibly important. These results are fairly stable from 2022, showing there is still work to be done and influencing to be done. And I think we should aim for 100%. So I think we are managing a very, very disparate group of conditions, some of which still haven't had their genetic defect found. But we have to aim for that 100%, maybe knowing that we might get close, but that has to be the aim. It's so important to have a genetic diagnosis and counselling, because it's vital for so many areas of life. So for us, obviously, the search for a treatment is so important, and the more people with a genetic diagnosis in the system engaged, knowing this, helps that process along. And also, when we do get treatments, it's going to be so important that we can find everybody. So in the past, there has been situations where patients can't be found for clinical trials or for treatments, and we don't want that to happen in the UK. So please, when people speak to you about genetic diagnosis, it's not an immediate fix. It's further information, it's further being in the system, and it's incredibly, incredibly important for the future of finding treatments and for the families with these conditions. All of this data suggests that our Unlock Genetics resource, created as a direct response of this survey, is having an impact. We know many, many of you professionals signpost it, but if you're not familiar with it, please go online, Unlock Genetics on the Retina UK website, and have a look and let us know what you think and pass it on to your clients. However, there's still a lot of work to be done around the patient group understanding their disease. So with genetic counselling, as opposed to diagnosis, only 34% of people have accessed this, but 43% felt this had a positive difference, and nearly half of all people were not aware. So we have to do more to raise awareness of the potential benefits of not only receiving your genetic diagnosis, but what it means, and if you're not especially if you're not advised what your causative gene is at that stage, what does it mean to be in that system without that? And please consider raising genetic counselling and testing with your clients, and signpost to our Unlock Genetics if they require further information. Okay. So quality of life. So half of the respondents, or nearly half of the respondents who came back to us, say that their sight loss has had a severe or very severe impact on their quality of life, and this is slightly higher than 2022. 3/4, or nearly 3/4, of people who came back to us say they are managing their sight loss well, compared with 25% who would like to manage it better. Those doing well included a higher proportion of people who've had a diagnosis over 20 years, and importantly, those who engage with Retina UK. People who've had contact with Retina UK were far more likely to say they knew how to manage their sight loss and had support, 76% compared with 61%, than those not in contact. I think this demonstrates the positive impact we can make and the value of making a referral to us. So please continue to do this. Only 5% said they'd experienced no emotional or psychological impacts. Anxiety and loss of confidence continue to be the biggest emotional or psychological impacts of sight loss, though more people reported anger than in 2022, 47% against 42%. Sadly, across the inherited sight loss community, quality of life impacts have changed little over the 3 surveys, but there are some differences. Half of the respondents said their sight loss has a severe or very severe impact on their quality of life, which we've said is higher than 2022. And there are significantly more people experiencing extreme side effects, specifically in education, their career and their jobs, and their relationships. In 2022, the impacts were reported as less severe. The 2025 data suggests a reversal to pre-COVID levels of impact, specifically on education and work. And upon reflection, could this be something to do with the trend back away from home working and studying, coupled with the cost of living increases that have had this negative impact? So one thing that we did get from the Quality of Life survey is lots of feedback about the strength of peers and meeting with peers and having those conversations, increasing resilience and strength to deal with these day-to-day challenges. Okay, so we also asked about the point of diagnosis. And fortunately, experiences of receiving diagnosis appear to have returned to a positive upward trend, following an understandable dip during the pandemic years. The proportion offered emotional and psychological support at diagnosis is increasing, and this is incredibly encouraging for us here at Retina UK. One area of improvement for those diagnosed in the past 5 years is that almost 4 in 10 were told about the support available from Retina UK, compared with a low of 18% for those diagnosed 5 to 10 years ago. And encouragingly, there's been a higher agreement that the person delivering the diagnosis had a good knowledge of the individual's condition. We've really focused on growing our relationships with you, the professionals who support people with inherited sight loss. So this is really pleasing to see. So thank you for engaging with us. Thank you for referring to us, and for so many of you being here today and online as evidence of this, of us being a trusted partner for you. Okay. So let's get into some of the areas where you guys work. So accessing support and services. People tell us that the most useful services for people with sight loss for all 3 surveys remain: benefits advice, mobility training, access to work schemes, and social services support. Advice on claiming benefits. 60% of people have accessed with an 82 positive difference, and only 33% weren't aware of that service. I'm also pleased to tell you that satisfaction with ECLO support rose, but there is still significant unmet need in this area, which won't come for a surprise. I think we can never have enough ECLOs in clinics to cover everything, so we take that into account. 39% of people have accessed, and 65% of these said it made a really positive difference to them. And 55% said they were not aware of an ECLO service or it was not available to them. And I'd just like to caveat that for the ECLOs in the room, that there's one of you and hundreds of people running through a clinic. I think it would be absolutely impossible at that stage, but that's something obviously we know that the RNIB are working on, and we'd like to support them with that. When it comes to mobility training, 57% have accessed this and 81% that it made a positive difference. So only 34% said they weren't aware of it or it was not made available to them. So a third of people with mobility training, I think there's an area for, an area for some focus. The Access to Work scheme, 35% accessed and 71% made a positive difference and 25% weren't aware. I think with those particular stats with Access to Work is we have to remember that the majority of the people who responded to our survey have had a diagnosis for over 20 years. So they're likely to be retired towards the end of their careers. So maybe it wouldn't be such an obvious thing. So if you take into account that element, then actually it's probably quite a high service, which is why it's so important that we get responses from our younger generations as well. We are really proud of the satisfaction with the support from Retina UK staff and volunteers has increased significantly since 2019, from 58% in 2019 to 67% this year. So, the top 5 services that are not accessed because they were not available or the respondents were unaware is the ECLO service, genetic testing and counselling, social services support and counselling. We've got some quite hard-hitting quotes in the free text from this area, and I'd just like to share one with you, which I think wraps it up. And that is, nothing is ever offered. You have to find out, and then you have to fight for it. And this is really interesting feedback, and I think it really supports the fact that a referral to an organisation like Retina UK can help take some of that sort of fight or flight sort of energy out of looking for services and support. Some interesting feedback we got from our lived experience volunteers who I shared this with a couple of weeks ago is that this could be partly due to some of the retainment of information at the point of diagnosis. It's really difficult. You've probably been given some really bad news by somebody who probably really didn't want to give you that news, and there's a lot to take in. So having an overload of information could be potentially difficult. So it's an area to look at is how to get information to people at the right time in the right format. So it's something that we're looking at. So I think the takeaway from this is signposting really makes a difference. I think remembering Retina UK website or Retina UK is something that people can retain and get in touch with us when the time is right or when an impact lands with them due to their condition. Okay, let's have a look at technology. Okay, so respondents use a wide range of aids, in particular inbuilt accessibility features on smartphones and tablets, and flashlights and illumination devices were highly used. When it came to barriers to accessing aids, I think some of this is reflective again of the older generation of people who responded, which is they don't know how to obtain and they didn't know it existed and they weren't confident to use it. I think those 3 areas are not easy in any way, but they're quite simple to overcome. There are things we can do about that come logically to mind. The one that we would like to have a look at is it's too expensive, with nearly 40% of people saying that. And I'm not entirely sure if for all accessibility tools that is the case, but we need to have a look into that. Because we know that technology is a huge enabler at home, education, work, and it's an area that we'll be having a look at in the future to make sure that we can crack some of these challenges that we're being told. I know many of you will be attending the technology session this afternoon, and I certainly will be, and to learn some more about this area, and there will be recordings available if you're not. Okay. All right, let's have a look at research. So this is a central area to Retina UK's activity. We've funded, as Cathy said, over £18 million into research since we were founded 50 years ago, and play a really important role in educating, informing our community and driving research to treatments. And we'll be hearing about some more developments later on this morning. Retina UK remains the top source of research information, and as with previous surveys, awareness of research is much higher among those who have engaged with Retina UK compared to those who haven't, nearly double. Again, we need to aim for a fuller saturation This is beneficial both for treatments and the research needed to get there, but also for communities' peace of mind and interest in that research is happening and there's hope on the horizon. There is a significant increase in the proportion who have said they have participated in research, 24% compared with 20% both in 2022 and 2019, but there's still much more to do. We have over 600 participants on our lived experience panel who are advised of the opportunities to get involved in research, and you'll hear more about this later on today. Okay. I think the takeaway from this is we found that a lot of our community are really interested and garner a lot of comfort from knowing research is happening. And I think conversations about research and research advancement and the ability to get involved is really important to everyday well-being as well as the future of the community. Okay, let's have a quick look at mental health. So, as we found out 3 years ago, there is evidence of huge mental health impacts of inherited sight loss. And as a result, we created our Discover Wellbeing resource, which is designed to help people before they get to crisis point. And I would really encourage you to signpost your clients and customers, your patients, to this resource if you feel that they are struggling. As I mentioned earlier, 5% said they'd experienced no emotional or psychological impacts, but 77% had suffered with some anxiety, and 73% with loss of confidence, and they continue to be the biggest emotional and psychological impacts of sight loss. And as I mentioned earlier, a lot more people are reporting that they feel anger in connection with their condition as opposed to 2022. 1 in 5 respondents say they've accessed mental health support in relation to their sight loss, and of those who hadn't, 83% said it was because they were not in need of it. Of those who received support, 4 in 5 had access to talking therapy, such as counselling or psychotherapy, and 2 in 5 had received prescription medication to help control their symptoms. While half referred themselves for support, the proportion referred by a healthcare professional increased to 40% from 33 3 years ago. But on a positive note, respondents reported shorter waiting times, with 1 in 4 receiving treatment within 2 weeks, compared with only 1 in 10 reporting the same in 2022. And this really highlights to me how the professional body looking after this community and probably across the board has raised its game to meet the mental health challenges that are emerging at the moment. So, finally, let's have a look at attitudes towards Retina UK. This is where I sell ourselves even more, so we can prove ourselves to be a trusted partner to you. So, online search continues to be the main way that recently diagnosed patients and respondents find their way to Retina UK. So, signposting from health professionals remains an important and growing referral route. We're working hard to raise awareness of our work and increase these direct referrals. So most respondents agree that Retina UK is approachable, we're trustworthy, and we're ambitious on behalf of people with sight loss. And there's a broad agreement that the charity listens and responds to people with inherited sight loss. 1 in 3 rate Retina UK's services and support overall as excellent, which is higher than any previous survey, with our regular newsletters, our website, annual conference and webinars all scoring over 90% satisfaction. Support with fundraising, helpline, Facebook support, peer support groups, podcasts, Discover Wellbeing, talk and support, all scored well over 80% in satisfaction rates. So more respondents than in 2022 or 2019 agree that thanks to Retina UK, they have more confidence in managing the challenges of sight loss and a greater awareness of available support. So I'm hoping that that slide and some of the response that we got from our community lets you take away the note that we are a trusted partner. We want to work with you. We want to help you support the people that you're coming into contact from our community. So please, please refer to us. And if there's anything that we can do to support you, please speak to one of the staff members today. And we'd love to have those conversations to make sure that, yes, we're enabling you as well. And we're making it easy for you to help you refer people to Retina UK. Okay, so just the key takeaways. I can see Lauren's looking at her watch, which always means, am I all right? Okay. I can monologue with the best of them. Okay, so here are the key takeaways for you guys to take. Okay, so sight loss has a major impact on life. But we know that support can change everything. We know anecdotally and through our surveys that meeting others who are in a similar situation to you in peer groups, knowing where to find information, or even knowing your inner system makes all the difference to day-to-day life and well-being. We also know that we are dealing with a geographically and conditionally disparate group of people. In every corner of the UK, different ophthalmologists, different levels of local groups, different levels of care across the board. We know that not everybody knows we're here to help. So everybody, if we could all make a concerted push to make sure that the outer reaches, geographically, however it is, of the community know we're here, so they have a choice to engage with us, they have a choice to come and find the information, and that is immediately, on a very subconscious but very significant level, a huge lift to people's well-being. You are our vital connectors and supporters. You're one of our leads in, and we are one of the safe houses for you. So what we do know is that together, professionals, clinical staff, all the way through to us here at the charity, we can create confidence, we create a community, and we help improve the lives of this community. And for that, as Chief Executive of Retina UK, I am eternally grateful to all of you for taking the time to improve your skills, learn more about this community, and obviously doing the absolute best you can for this community. So thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day.